My best friend called me, sobbing. She had just slept with a married man. Furious, I asked, who? She whispered my husband's name. My heart stopped. Pretending not to know, I invited him to dinner. As he sat down, I looked him dead in the eyes and said, tell me, how was your night with my best friend? His fork dropped. My best friend walked in, pale and shaking. What happened next left him begging for forgiveness. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when my phone rang. It was Rachel, my best friend of 15 years. The moment I answered, all I could hear was her sobbing. Loud, broken, gasping sobs. I sat up straighter. Rachel? What's wrong? She didn't answer right away. She was crying so hard I could barely make out the sound of her breath. Rachel, I said, more firmly this time. Are you okay? Where are you? She sniffled, then let out a shaky exhale. I'm a terrible person, she whispered. I frowned. What? I messed up. Her voice caught, and she started sobbing again. I did something horrible. My stomach twisted. Rachel, what happened? She took a deep breath, like she was trying to steady herself. Then, in the smallest, most broken voice, she said, I slept with a married man. I felt an immediate wave of disappointment. Rachel was the kind of person who always made a big deal about loyalty. She'd judge anyone who even flirted with someone who was taken. I shook my head, trying to keep my voice even. Rachel. How could you? I didn't know at first, she choked out. But then I found out. And I shut my eyes. God, Rachel. She sobbed harder. It was shitty. But it wasn't my problem. Until I asked the next question. Who? Dead silence. Something about it made my stomach drop. Rachel, I said slowly, who was it? For a few seconds, it felt like the world had shifted, like the ground beneath me wasn't solid anymore. I forced myself to breathe. I could have screamed at her. I could have cursed her out, told her I hated her, asked her why she would do something like this to me. Instead, I swallowed the fire burning in my chest and said, Rachel. I need you to do something for me. Okay, she said hesitantly. I took another breath. Come over for dinner tonight. A sharp inhale. What? You, me, and Ethan. Dinner. 7 o'clock. Oh my God. I ignored her panic. See you then. Then I hung up. At 6:55 p.m., I was setting the table when Ethan walked in. Smells amazing, he said, dropping his keys on the counter. He loosened his tie and walked over, pressing a kiss to my cheek. What's the occasion? I smiled. Just wanted to have a nice night. He didn't notice how stiff I was. I heard a knock on the door. Ethan turned toward the sound. Expecting someone? I wiped my hands on a towel. Yep. I walked to the door and opened it. Rachel was standing there. She looked awful. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. Her hands were shaking at her sides. Please, she whispered. Don't do this. I smiled. Come in. She flinched, but stepped inside. Ethan saw her and frowned. Rachel? Hey. What's going on? I gestured toward the table. Sit. Ethan glanced at me, then back at Rachel, confused. But he sat down. Rachel did too. I poured 3 glasses of wine. Then, I sat down across from them, folded my hands, and smiled. Then I looked Ethan dead in the eyes and said, Tell me, how was your night with my best friend? His fork slipped from his fingers, clattering against the plate. Rachel covered her mouth with her hands. The only sound was the flickering of the candle on the table. I slept with a married man. It was Ethan. Ethan's entire face drained of color. Rachel buried her face in her hands. I tilted my head, still smiling. I'd love to hear you explain this. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Baby, how long? I asked. His throat bobbed. He hesitated. How long, Ethan? I repeated, sharper this time. 6 months, he whispered. Rachel let out a choked sob. My stomach twisted. 6 months. For 6 months, he had come home to me every night. Kissed me. Slept next to me. Looked me in the eyes and told me he loved me. I felt something inside me snap. You disgust me, I said. Ethan reached for my hand. Please, I swear, I yanked my hand away. He flinched. I made a mistake. Mistake? I let out a bitter laugh. A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. A mistake is buying the wrong kind of milk. This was a choice you made. Over and over and over again. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Please. I love you, you don't love me. Rachel wiped her tears. I was drunk, I turned to her sharply. Shut up. She flinched. I stood up, grabbed my wine glass, and, without breaking eye contact, poured it all over Ethan. Rachel gasped. Ethan sat there, drenched, eyes wide. I exhaled slowly. Hope it was worth it. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out of the dining room. And that was just the beginning. I locked myself in the bathroom. My hands were shaking as I gripped the sink, staring at my reflection. My face was flushed, my chest rising and falling too fast. I felt like I was floating outside of my own body, like none of this was real. But it was real. Ethan. My husband. My best friend. 6 months. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the rage and heartbreak to settle. It didn't. From the dining room, I could hear Ethan's voice, low and frantic. Rachel, why would you tell her? Rachel let out a sob. I couldn't take it anymore. The guilt was eating me alive. I snorted. Guilt. Funny how guilt only mattered when people got caught. I yanked open the door and stormed back into the room. They both turned to look at me, Rachel's face streaked with tears, Ethan still soaked in red wine. I crossed my arms. I want you both to leave. Ethan shot up from his chair. Wait, get out. He paled. But we need to talk, there's nothing left to say. I grabbed his jacket from the chair and threw it at him. Get your shit and get out of my house. He didn't move. His jaw clenched, like he was trying to figure out how to control the situation. I turned to Rachel. You too. Her lips parted, her hands trembling in her lap. I grabbed the wine bottle and hurled it at the wall. The glass shattered. Deep red splattered across the white paint. Rachel screamed. Ethan jumped back. Jesus Christ. I glared at them. Get out. Rachel scrambled from her chair and bolted for the door, her heels clicking against the floor. Ethan hesitated for a second longer before grabbing his keys and following her. The door slammed shut. And then I was alone. The silence in the house felt heavier than it ever had before. I stood in the middle of the wrecked dining room, staring at the broken glass, the spilled wine, the untouched plates of food. Then I let out a deep breath, grabbed my phone, and did what any woman in my position would do. I started digging. I went to our shared laptop, my hand steady despite the fire in my chest. Ethan was careless. Overconfident. And I knew, deep down, that what I had found out tonight was only the tip of the iceberg. I started with his emails. Nothing at first. Then I checked his trash folder. And there it was. An email from a hotel. A reservation from 2 months ago. Under a fake name, but with his credit card. I clicked on it. My stomach clenched. The room was booked for 3 nights. I kept going. Bank statements. Messages. Old phone backups. Every time I thought I had found the worst of it, something worse popped up. It wasn't just Rachel. There were others. Receipts from bars and hotels in different cities. Late-night Uber rides to random addresses. Flirty texts from numbers I didn't recognize. I gripped the edge of the desk, breathing hard. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a lifestyle. He had been living this life behind my back while playing the role of the devoted husband. My vision blurred. Then, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. I stared at the screen, my whole body thrumming with fury. Then I answered. Hello? My voice was ice. He exhaled, like he was relieved I had picked up. Baby, listen, shut up. A pause. I found everything, I said. The hotels. The texts. The emails. You weren't just cheating with Rachel. Silence. Then, click. He hung up. My blood turned cold. I stared at my phone. He didn't even try to deny it. I clenched my jaw and called back. It went straight to voicemail. Coward. My heart pounded. I knew, without a doubt, that Ethan was scrambling. Trying to figure out his next move. And that's when a terrible thought crept in. Rachel had broken first. But had she told me everything? I grabbed my coat and keys. I needed to see her. Now. Rachel lived in a small apartment across town. I drove there on autopilot, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. When I got there, I banged on her door. A long pause. Then footsteps. The door cracked open. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Jesus, what are you? I pushed past her and stepped inside. She turned, looking panicked. Look, I know you're angry, but, how long? I asked. She froze. My voice dropped. How long, Rachel? She swallowed. I already told you, no, I cut her off. I'm not talking about just the two of you. I found the other women. But I want to know how long you knew about them. Rachel's face drained of color. She opened her mouth. Closed it. And that was all the answer I needed. I let out a sharp laugh. Oh my God. She stepped toward me. I wanted to tell you, but you didn't. She covered her face with her hands. I was scared, okay? I thought if I told you about them, I scoffed. You thought what? That I'd leave him? That I'd be free to move on and you'd lose him? She looked away. And that's when it hit me. She hadn't just slept with Ethan. She had wanted him. This wasn't just an affair. Rachel had been competing with the other women. I exhaled, shaking my head. You're disgusting. She started crying again. But I was already walking away. There was only one thing left to do. And Ethan had no idea what was coming. I walked out of Rachel's apartment without another word. I was done listening to her excuses. But I wasn't done yet. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tight my fingers ached. My mind was spinning, replaying everything I had just discovered. Ethan was a serial cheater. Rachel had known about the other women. And now, I knew something they didn't. I wasn't just going to leave Ethan. I was going to ruin him. But before I could start, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, you should talk to me before you do anything stupid. I frowned. Before I could type a response, another text came in. Unknown number, check your email. A chill ran down my spine. I opened my inbox. And my blood turned ice cold. Attached was a video. I hesitated for a moment before pressing play. The screen was dark at first. Then, the image sharpened. A hotel room. A bed. Ethan. But he wasn't with Rachel. He was with someone else. And this time, it wasn't just some random woman. It was his boss's wife. I covered my mouth. Oh. I had spent the last few hours thinking about how Ethan had ruined my life. But this? This was a whole new level of stupid. I took a shaky breath and scrolled down to the sender's email. No name. No message. Just the video. Someone out there wanted me to know this. And I had a feeling I knew who it was. I called the number. A man answered on the first ring. Took you long enough. His voice was deep. Calm. Too calm. Who is this? I demanded. You already know, he said. Or at least, you have a good guess. My pulse pounded. Ethan's boss? A dry chuckle. Ding ding ding. I exhaled. Why send this to me? Because, he said, we want the same thing. I gripped the phone tighter. And what's that? To see your husband burn. I let that sink in. Ethan hadn't just been playing me. He had been playing his boss. And judging by the tone of this man's voice, that was about to be a very big problem for Ethan. I swallowed. What do you want from me? Meet me, he said. Tomorrow. Noon. The coffee shop on 5th. Let's talk. Then he hung up. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, heart hammering. I had gone from a betrayed wife to someone holding the kind of information that could destroy Ethan's entire life. And I wasn't going to waste it. The next day, I walked into the coffee shop and spotted him immediately. Tall. Sharp suit. Dark eyes that looked like they had already decided what to do with Ethan before he even saw me. Ethan's boss. He nodded toward the seat across from him. Sit. I did. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then he leaned forward. You want revenge, don't you? I didn't even hesitate. Yes. Good. He slid a manila envelope across the table. Because I have a plan. I stared at it. What's this? Proof, he said. Enough to ruin Ethan's career. His reputation. His finances. Everything. I opened it. Inside were bank statements, emails, and worst of all, NDAs with other women. Women who had signed contracts to keep quiet about their relationships with him. My stomach turned. Ethan's been cheating on you for a long time, his boss said. And I have every reason to believe he was planning to keep doing it. Forever. I looked up at him. Why are you showing me this? His lips curled into a smirk. Because, sweetheart, you have nothing to lose. And he was right. I had nothing to lose. But Ethan? He was about to lose everything. That night, I sat in my car outside our house, the envelope of evidence resting on the passenger seat. I could see Ethan inside, pacing the living room. He had probably been trying to reach me all day. I let my phone buzz, his name flashing on the screen. Then I hit record on my voice memo app and finally answered. Baby, where have you been? His voice was rushed, desperate. I stayed silent. Listen, I know you're mad, but I need you to understand. It was a mistake. A stupid mistake. How many NDAs did you make women sign? I asked. Silence. I smiled. Gotcha. His breathing turned ragged. Where did you hear that? Does it matter? Ethan let out a shaky laugh. Babe, we can talk about this. I love you. You're my wife. We can work through, I'm not your wife anymore, I said. I'm your worst nightmare. Then I hung up. And the real war began. The next morning, I walked into Ethan's office building. The receptionist recognized me instantly. I had been the doting wife, the one who brought cookies for the staff, the one who smiled at Christmas parties. I wasn't smiling today. I need to see your boss, I said. She blinked. Ethan's in a meeting, not Ethan, I said. His boss. Her face paled. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in a boardroom with Ethan's boss and 3 senior executives. I slid the envelope onto the table. Everything you need to fire him is in there, I said. Ethan's boss smirked. Not just fire him. Blacklist him. I smiled. Ethan had destroyed our marriage. Now, I was going to destroy him. And this was just the beginning. 2 days after I handed over the evidence, Ethan was fired. Not just fired, his entire career was obliterated. Word spread fast. The company didn't just terminate him, they sent out a statement condemning his inappropriate workplace conduct. It didn't give details, but people could guess. His name started popping up on industry blogs, whispered in corporate circles. He lost everything. I didn't stop there. I made sure Rachel's fiancé, yes, the fiancé she never mentioned, found out about her little affair. I sent him the receipts. He dumped her immediately and kicked her out of their shared apartment. She tried to call me. I let it ring. Then I blocked her. I was done. Or so I thought. Because Ethan wasn't. It was a Thursday evening when he showed up. I was sitting in the living room, drinking tea, when I heard the knock. It was too aggressive. Too familiar. I already knew who it was. I opened the door, and there he stood. Ethan. Disheveled, eyes bloodshot, his shirt wrinkled like he had slept in it. His tie was gone. His confidence was gone. The man who had once strutted around like he owned the world now looked like a broken shell of himself. Good. I folded my arms. What do you want? He stepped forward, but I didn't move. I lost everything, he said, voice hoarse. I tilted my head. Did you? His jaw clenched. You did this to me. I laughed. A sharp, cold sound. You did this to yourself. He ran a hand through his messy hair. God, just listen to me. I didn't reply. He took a shaky breath. I fucked up, okay? I know that. But his voice cracked. I love you. I rolled my eyes. Are you serious? I do, he insisted. I swear to God, stop lying. I exploded. Ethan flinched. My hands were shaking, but I didn't care. You don't love me, Ethan. You loved having me. You loved the security. The image. The comfort. But if you loved me, you wouldn't have spent 6 months, and probably longer, screwing other women behind my back. His breathing turned ragged. I was stupid, okay? I was weak. But I swear, I never meant to hurt you. I laughed bitterly. That's what people like you always say. But the truth is, you never thought about me at all. He stepped closer. Please. Give me another chance. I'll do anything. I stared at him. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing. I used to love this man. I used to build my world around him. But now? Now, he was just a pathetic stranger standing in my doorway, begging for something he had already thrown away. I shook my head. No, Ethan. We're done. His eyes filled with desperation. You don't mean that. I smiled. A slow, cruel smile. Yes, I do. And then I stepped back. Just in time for the moving truck to pull into the driveway. His face twisted in confusion. What the hell is that? I smirked. I sold the house. His mouth fell open. What? You heard me, I said. I don't want this place. Too many bad memories. I shrugged. Besides, I got a great offer. His face turned red. You can't just, oh, but I can. His whole body was shaking now. Where am I supposed to go? I smiled sweetly. Not my problem. And then I shut the door in his face. The next few weeks were surreal. I moved into a small but beautiful apartment downtown. It was mine. Only mine. No ghosts of Ethan's betrayal lingering in the walls. No reminders of the life I had lost. Rachel tried to reach out. I never responded. Mutual friends tried to get me to talk to her. I ignored them too. If they couldn't understand why I wanted her out of my life, then they didn't belong in it either. Ethan, on the other hand, spiraled. Without his job, his reputation, or his money, he started calling me, leaving pathetic voicemails about how much he missed me, how he needed me. Then the voicemails turned angry. Blaming me. Cursing me. I blocked him. And that was the last time I ever heard his voice. One night, I sat alone in my new apartment, drinking wine on the balcony. The city lights twinkled below, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal. The lies. The heartbreak. And I realized something. I didn't regret exposing Ethan. I didn't regret cutting Rachel out of my life. But I did regret one thing. I regretted not seeing the signs sooner. I had spent so many years thinking I had the perfect marriage. I ignored the red flags, convinced myself that Ethan would never do something like this. But he did. And now, I knew better. I had survived the worst kind of betrayal. And I had come out stronger. I took another sip of wine, letting the cool night air wash over me. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Because I was finally free.